There is something that happens when you spend your life listening to people, not just hearing them, listening, sitting with what they carry, the fear, the grief, the things they have never said to anyone else. I did that for 50 years. I was a psychiatrist, and after all that time, if you asked me what I learned, I think I would say this. What hurts people most is not pain itself. It is carrying that pain alone. That may sound simple, but it took me decades to understand what it really means. I sat with thousands of people in those years. I heard about marriages that slowly went silent, about children who grew distant, about bodies that stopped cooperating, about nights that felt too long and years that went by too fast. And now I am retired. I am in my 70s. I no longer sit across from patients in my office, but what I heard in those rooms has stayed with me. It settled somewhere deep, and it changed how I see almost everything. So today I want to talk about a few things I came to understand. Not theories, not techniques, just things that became clear to me slowly over a very long time. The first thing I learned is that most people are not really looking for answers. They are looking to be heard. This surprised me when I was younger. I had studied for years. I had been trained to diagnose, to analyze, to treat. And when someone sat down across from me, I believed my job was to find the right thing to say. But I was wrong about that. What I found again and again is that the deepest relief a person can feel does not come from a solution. It comes from a moment when someone truly understands what they are going through. Not fixes it, just understands it. I remember a man sometime in his 60s who had been carrying guilt for most of his adult life. He had done something years ago that hurt someone he loved, and he had never spoken about it. Not to his wife, not to anyone. When he finally said it out loud, he wept. I had not said a word. He wept simply because, for the first time, the thing he had been holding was no longer only his. That taught me something I never forgot. People do not always need to be fixed. Sometimes they just need someone to sit with them in the truth of what they feel, without rushing, without trying to make it better. And I think this is something we forget as we get older. We start to believe that our pain is too old to matter, that our sadness should have passed by now, that we should be stronger than we are. But pain does not follow a schedule, and it does not expire. The second thing I came to understand is that regret is not always what it appears to be. Many people came to me carrying regret. They talked about roads not taken, relationships they did not protect, words they never said, years they felt they wasted. And yes, regret can be heavy. I would never minimize that. But over time, I noticed something. The people who suffered most from regret were not the ones who had made the worst decisions. They were the ones who believed that a different decision would have made everything all right. That is the part of regret that nobody talks about. It tells you that somewhere, in some other version of your life, there was a path without suffering, a life with no loss, a version of you that never made a mistake. But that life does not exist. It never did. Every path has weight. Every choice opens something and closes something else. And the people I saw who eventually made peace with their past were not the ones who stopped wishing things had gone differently. They were the ones who came to accept that life was never going to be without difficulty, no matter what they chose. There is something in that acceptance, not happiness exactly, something quieter than that, a kind of mercy toward yourself, a willingness to say, I did what I could with what I knew at the time. That is not weakness. That is one of the most honest things a person can say. The third thing I learned took me the longest to see, and it is this: growing older does not mean growing smaller. The world tells a very particular story about aging. It says that youth is when life happens, and everything after that is a slow decline. And we hear that story so often that many people begin to believe it. They start to feel invisible, as though who they are matters less with each passing year. But that is not what I saw. What I saw in 50 years of sitting with people is that some of the most important growth a person goes through happens late in life. Not growth in the way the world usually talks about it, not careers or accomplishments, but growth in understanding, in honesty, in the ability to see what actually matters. I sat with people in their 70s and 80s who were seeing things clearly for the first time, who were letting go of roles they had played for decades, who were finally being honest with themselves about what they needed and what they did not. That is not fading. That is something closer to becoming real. So if you are in a time of life where the world seems to be telling you that your best years are behind you, I want you to consider that the world may be wrong about that. What you are living now still has something to give you. Not the same things as before, but something that only becomes visible when the noise begins to settle. The last thing I want to share is maybe the simplest thing I know, but it is the one that has stayed with me the most. In all my years of listening to people, across all the fear and grief and confusion I sat with, the thing that helped people most was not a breakthrough. It was not a clever insight. It was not a moment of sudden understanding. It was the feeling that they were not alone. That is all, and that is everything. When a person feels that someone is truly with them, something shifts. The fear does not go away. The grief does not disappear, but the weight becomes something they can carry. And inside that, there is room to breathe. I believe that is what we all need, no matter how old we are, no matter how much time is left, no matter what we carry. We need to know that we are not the only ones lying awake at night, wondering about the things that matter most. You are not the only one. I am no longer a practicing psychiatrist, but I still think about these things, most days, to be honest. And I thought it might be worthwhile to sit here and speak about them, not as a doctor, not as someone with answers, but as a man who spent a long time listening and who was changed by what he heard. If any of this meant something to you, you are welcome to come back. There will be more reflections like this one, quiet ones, honest ones, and you are welcome here whenever you need them.